Hello and welcome to Module 1 of this completely free golf psychology series, brought to you by freesportspsych.com and me, Psycho Sid. As per the instructions in the email I sent you, I hope you have a pen and paper to hand to make any notes that you need. Just pause the presentation as necessary. Also, please watch the presentation in full screen mode. Click on the rectangular icon in the bottom right of the video box. Okay, let's get started. The title for this module is Team You, and we will be considering how a golfer's mind operates and creates habits and behaviours. To start this module, we will look at the most basic of human natures. So, what do we think? What do we imagine is deeply ingrained within us? Here are a couple of suggestions. Survival is an obvious place to start. We will seek out food and drink and also shelter. This is clearly a basic human nature. Also, the desire to continue our genes is an innate human behaviour that we all share. Closer scrutiny of these human natures would reveal that often people do not subscribe. Many people have dangerous jobs, and although they surely take precautions, it seems strange to be so at odds with the basic human nature. Also, we are all aware that people give their lives to save others, and sometimes tragically take their own lives if living is too much to bear. It is also the case that people do not always wish to have children. So we see clear examples where these basic human natures are not being adhered to. So, especially when considering personal development, in our case golfing improvement, maybe we need to look elsewhere to understand basic human nature. How about these two statements? To recreate yourself in your own image and to seek out what is most familiar. Now we are concentrating on the everyday lives of human beings and looking closely at how behaviours and habits are formed. Every day when we get out of bed, we look to recreate ourselves by following the same basic patterns of living. How we act and interact remains very consistent. There are many human behaviours and habits that seem very odd and positively dangerous to health, such as smoking, excessive drinking and poor diets. And yet they remain, even though the owners may want them to disappear. The truth is, the habits have become part of the person's complete being, and every day there are powerful forces ensuring they continue. In the case of the golfer, there are strong habits formed, from what you wear to play to how you practice, if at all, to your strategy in play, to your responses and reactions to the good and bad. So maybe we can say that a basic human nature is to avoid change. An obvious challenge to this statement would be, what about the people who are thrill seekers, can never be tied down? Well, these people have a desire to seek out thrills and challenges, and that in itself is the recreating pattern. These people will seek out change when a period of stability would clearly be in their best interest. Golfers change their equipment far too frequently. Rather than become completely comfortable with what they have. This applies to tour players especially. There is far too frequently a new putter in the bag. As a basic human nature then, we are creating a behavioural loop that we will describe here as TEAM, an acronym that will help us remember the important points of learning. So, our first letter is T, and this letter stands for thinking. Everything starts with a thought, and it will be true to say that these thoughts are constant all day long, and without going into the finer details of dream states, of course we even think when we are sleeping. I think we can agree here that an empty mind is not a realistic possibility. Even deep levels of meditation require focus on one thing to the exclusion of all others. So an empty mind is not really feasible. So let's try and categorise these thoughts. They certainly can be positive or negative. Our thoughts will meander along through the day, and there will certainly be good and bad. No real control is being exercised here. We will just be responding to the stimuli of our surroundings or the subjects we are considering. Playing golf produces many positive and negative thoughts throughout a round. It is also true that a thought can be real or imaginary. By this I mean, does the thought emanate from a real memory, or are we constructing a possible future yet to be experienced? We are perfectly capable of imagining locations or people that we have not yet seen. In golf, we certainly remember playing certain holes on our home golf course, labelling them favourites or most hated. We will create images in advance of playing these holes as we approach the tee box. If we are visiting a course and arrive at a hole with a lake in front of the green, do we start making pictures? Yes, of course we do. The interesting point here is whether we can tell the difference between the real memory or the imaginary. The constructions are just as lifelike as the memories. This, in fact, is how the technology of hypnotherapy and visualizing works, creating images of a desirable future not yet experienced. I have already mentioned the images that accompany the thoughts, but we mustn't imagine that they are just visual, or indeed visual at all. People construct their images using some or all of their senses, which includes seeing, hearing, touching, smelling and tasting. In fact, when constructing an image, the more of these sensory perceptions we use, the more powerful the image. Let's move on. Our second letter is E, and E stands for emotion. We can state that every thought creates an emotion that attaches to it. This emotion could be happiness, sadness, anxiety, anger, etc., etc. Think of how you feel approaching that hole that you have double bogeyed the last 3 times. We can also state that this process is automatic and instant. It is true that the emotive content may be quite subtle. If we are thinking of our putting warm-up, the emotion will be very small, but it is still there. We can establish is that the strength of the emotion is adding great weight to the original thought. In the extreme examples of anger at a double bogey and maybe euphoria at an eagle, we can see that our thoughts are being charged by these emotions. So what happens next? Our bodies will function differently as a result of these emotions. We will see a change in our heart rate and style and pace of breathing, and an overall change in body language, which we will cover in greater detail in a later module. In turn, our decision making is going to alter. According to the initial thought and subsequent emotion, this will be a very positive or negative occurrence. What is really important to grasp here is how automatic this process is. Very little control is being exercised. So what happens next? On to our next letter A, which stands for action. We are now following the instructions laid down by our thoughts and emotions. Please remember, this has been an automatic process where we have arrived at the action stage with little conscious control. Therefore, our actions will be uncontrolled and maybe negative. I have approached the hole I hate and think about those doubles. Anxiety is created and I hook my tee shot. Or maybe incredibly positive. I reach the short par 5 I always birdie. I think about the times I have smashed it down the wide fairway. I feel confident and swing my driver freely. So whether negative or positive, we have now reached the point where we have acted. In some way, we have altered the way the future shapes itself by our actions. And as all good scientists will tell you, every action causes a reaction. We are now becoming aware of the consequences of our actions in the immediate term, with longer term consequences due to arrive later. These consequences will be good or bad, dependent on the nature and suitability of our actions. Rather than consider here the reactions of the world around us, we need to focus on the reactions that we are going to experience within us. We now have our final letter, M for motivation. For us, we now have the end product. As a result of our thought, emotion and action, we have produced a result that is either favourable or not. This is going to have a great effect on our motivation to undertake that action again. We now have a loop. Our end result of level of motivation will feed directly into our thinking about that activity. And clearly, if the results were good, we are highly motivated to undertake that task again. Let me offer an example. You walk from the 6th green to the 7th tee, a short par 4. You immediately remember birdieing this hole the last 3 times. You get to hit your favourite 3-wood from the tee rather than the £500 driver you have just bought that you don't trust. You feel confident and in control. Your swing from the tee is smooth. No need to hit it hard, and the ball sails straight down the middle. It finishes just in the right place for a half wedge shot that you like. What will you think when you approach this hole next week? Great times, yes? But what if the results were bad? Everything as before, except this time you top your 3-wood and finish just 70 yards down in the rough. Are you still going to think so positively next time? It is also a possibility that when you play your most hated hole, you become anxious. You had to use that driver, but miraculously you pulled it off. You smashed it down the middle and ended up with a nice par on stroke index 1. Will you be motivated to play that hole again soon? What will you think next time you walk to the tee box? What I've discussed here is clearly a loop, and I'm sure you will be able to fill in real-life examples of how you've been affected by its nature. The loop will continue positively or negatively, of this we can be sure. Our habits and behaviours being formed and reinforced along the way. We have also seen how the loop may alter due to an unplanned change of fortune. What we want is to learn how to make those changes happen by design. Through this first module, I have set out to explain our basic human nature and how habits and behaviours work their way through a self-perpetuating loop. Please spend the next few days considering your set patterns of behaviour and how this loop directly affects you. What we need to do in the next module is start the process of taking control. I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.